Some things exist that are neither heard of nor seen before. Those who imagine such unique things and bring them into reality, through countless efforts, are the greatest innovators. There was a time when the world seemed terrifying as soon as night fell because no one knew when electricity would come. People used to lie down in the dark with their hands outstretched, hoping for sleep. Perhaps hardly anyone could sleep back then. In this dark world, there was a man who was constantly troubled by these dark nights, because he didn't understand the difference between day and night. The school considered him mad, because even after failing 10,000 times, he never learned to give up. The one who lit up the world with electricity. Let's begin the story of this man. His name was Thomas Edison. Regarding his education, all we can say is that he stopped going to school just a few days after enrolling because the things taught in school were difficult for him to understand quickly. So, he would ask such questions that the teachers, frustrated, would get angry and scold him. So, in anger, his mother stopped sending him to school. His mother was a teacher herself, so she started teaching him at home. But this was a completely different scenario. One day, he saw a hen sitting on its eggs. This young fellow got so inspired by the hen that he thought, this is such an easy task. If a hen can do it, why can't I? So, he didn't hold back in imitating the hen. He shooed the hen away and sat on the eggs himself. But the poor boy didn't know that the eggs need warmth, not weight. So, the eggs broke. However, people couldn't figure out whether the chicks wanted to come out of the eggs or if the eggs wanted to break on their own. One time, he sneakily put some powder up the nose of a sleeping man. Poor guy. And there was Edison's mischievous mind at work. He thought the powder's fumes would make the man start floating in the air. But the exact opposite happened. The man's threats and beating made Edison feel like he was about to float right out of his own body. He was always looking to do something different since he was a kid. They used to load up their farm produce on a train and take it to the city to sell. One day, while traveling on the train, he noticed that other people were enjoying themselves reading newspapers. That's when a light bulb went off in his head. He could make some money by selling those very newspapers. And that's exactly what he did. He convinced the train operators and jumped right into his new scheme. Selling newspapers to passengers on the train became his new hustle. The compartment where he kept his stuff became his office. He would read books in his spare time there and come up with all sorts of crazy ideas. Edison probably got bored of selling other people's old newspapers. So, with the idea of printing and selling his own newspaper on the train, he sneaked a printing press onto the moving train. He started printing and selling a newspaper called the Weekly Herald. This was the only newspaper printed on a moving train, and Edison was only 15 years old at the time. However, the newspaper didn't last long. Due to one of his antics, a fire broke out in his makeshift office. The guard had to stop the train immediately, and because of these kinds of stunts, Edison was kicked off the train. The guard, in anger, slapped him so hard that Edison couldn't hear properly from his ears ever since. After being thrown off the train, this person decided to bring a newspaper printing machine into his home. People enjoyed reading the short, amusing news pieces published in his newspapers. However, once again, he had to stop printing newspapers. This time, because he wrote something controversial about someone in the paper, he was caught and thrown by the riverside. Despite this, he didn't sit idle. He then decided to learn telegraphy. Back in those days, telegraph services were mainly used at train stations. One day, while walking by a station, he noticed a small child playing near the railway tracks. A train was approaching at full speed. Since he had a passion for becoming a superhero, without wasting any time, he ran and rescued the child just in time. And who was that child? The station master's son. The station master's heart melted. With his help, he learned telegraphy for free over the next 4 months and eventually got a job as an operator in the railway department. During this time, he completed his first invention. Normally, all operators in the railway had to send signals at precise times. He was doing his job as usual, but suddenly, a call came from the railway headquarters. However, there was no response from him. The railway staff were puzzled. Why wasn't he responding? Signals were continuously being sent under his name. The railway officials were perplexed. If he wasn't replying, then who was sending the signals? Sensing something was wrong, the railway officials went to check on him. When they arrived, they found that Edison was snoring away, fast asleep. He had rigged up a contraption that sent the signals automatically. It's unclear whether he kept his job after this, but he came up with a solution that ensured the railway department received signals on time while he comfortably slept. Oh, and during this time, he also invented a machine that used electricity to kill rats. There was a company in New York City called the Gold Indicator Company. What a name! It seems someone named it while dreaming of gold. Anyway, this company used to relay updates about fluctuations in gold prices to people via telegraph. People really trusted this company because whether the gold prices went up or down, their telegraph was the first to deliver the news. One day, the telegraph suddenly broke down. The company folks were as troubled as if their internet connection had been cut off. Engineers tried for hours to fix the machine, but nothing worked. Meanwhile, the customers were getting increasingly frustrated because they had no way of knowing the current gold prices. One day, as if by chance, Edison himself wandered onto the scene. When he learned that the telegraph had broken down, he convinced the company folks to let him take a shot at fixing the machine. And then, within minutes, the machine was up and running again, good as new. Everyone was astonished. The company was so impressed that they made him a manager right on the spot. As manager, Edison created a new machine called the Universal Printer, which could print newspapers at an incredible speed. The machine was so impressive that the company happily bought it from him for $40,000. He also made such improvements to the typewriter that people were left amazed. On top of that, he advanced Marconi's telephone. He even tried his hand at improving the loudspeaker. It seemed like Edison had gotten hold of a magic wand because he created something so unique that it could capture people's voices. Imagine how extraordinary this must have been at the time. I can't even fathom the reactions of people when they saw or heard this magic. They probably bit their fingers in awe. A crowd would gather outside his door because everyone was eager to see this magical machine. He named it the phonograph. It seems he had a deep love for the phone. Then began his obsession with creating a light bulb. He tried thousands of times and failed thousands of times. People said he had gone mad. He was so lost in the thought of making a light bulb that he lost track of how many times he had failed. It's a good thing someone told him that he had failed 10,000 times. He said, "Oh, 10,000 times. But I don't think I've failed 10,000 times, rather, I've discovered 10,000 ways that won't work to light a bulb. Now, it's just a matter of finding the right way." Not only did he light the bulb, but he also created a machine so incredible that people went crazy over it. The kinetoscope. It was a machine that showed moving pictures, but what did this machine look like? Well, it was a box-like thing with a small hole in it. Through this hole, pictures would pass one by one, so quickly that they appeared to be moving, as if magic was happening. The experience was even more delightful when Edison would play music from his phonograph. But that's old news now. Yes, it's old news, but back then, it was nothing short of magic. Because this was the world's first film. People even paid money to see it. The most important thing is that this film could only be viewed by one person at a time. In the end, I just want to say that people were so amazed and overwhelmed by his feats that they would say, what seems absurd and impossible to the world is just an ordinary thing for Edison. That's why he is called the machine of inventions.